Thank you, Anne. That's a lovely welcome to get. What the rose mankind?
Need with Carmel?
I'm very shy about this session because I'm really a fan of people. I admire so many people and love listening to them. But I am a bit of a fan of Manchán's, probably like most of you here. And so it's a kind of admission at Manchán that I'm very taken with you. And I see people pointing at their own chests, you too. So I'm in good company. So you have a representative here who's very taken with Manchán. And we became friends during lockdown. Kind of voice message, chop Dale friends. Kind of scutty, mischievous friends. And the more I know you, the less I feel I know you. Like, I don't know who you are. So, and the more I tried to do a bit of research, but as Manchán has been calling me Carmel Divween or Nivween? Divween, meaning lazy Carmel. So when I was researching for this, I just saw all the questions people had already asked you that I'd like to ask you. And I said, but I can't ask you them again, or you might get bored. So I thought we'll invite the fairies to lead us today. So, because that's why we call the session Away with the Fairies. So Manchán, can you invoke the fairies and invite them in first? Would you mind doing that? Maybe in Irish and English.
I knew this was going to be hard. I knew whatever Carmel was going to. Someone asked me yesterday in Carmel, they said, like, and so have you ever seen the fairies? Mm-hmm. And like, I'm 52, and no one has ever asked me that. People are always asking, have you seen ghosts? Mm-hmm. You know, but around the bonfire, you know, when you're a child, have you seen ghosts? Who's seen ghosts? But in all the years, we all know how to tell about the fairies, tell a fairy story about someone long ago, our granny saw the fairies. But that idea to ask a modern person, modern day, have you seen the fairies? Mm-hmm. So for you now, to want me to invoke the fairies, it just, like, it makes me realise, you know, two things I've realised in the last few years. First, that I have been totally cut off from, to a large degree, cut off from the land, and cut off from almost a female consciousness. You know, there's this rising among so many of us now, men, realising, oh wait there, we have been blind to this incipient racism, this incipient anti-women, not anti-women, just ignoring women. And so not always coming to these assumptions, male-dominated assumptions, even men who think they're sensitive. So in the same way that I'm realising I know very little about the land, I'm trying to feel my way into it. I know very little about women, I'm trying to feel my way into it. It's the woman part of me, into the, you know, that female side that all of us have. And then the other element is fairy, and they're all connected. So, like, it's frightening for me. Had you asked me, you know, invoke women, invoke the land, invoke fairies, they're all the same. They're all this other side knowingness that we know is always out there, and that all three of them are infinite, and that we know it if we tap into them. Well, they're going to swallow us whole, but we're going to become part of them, and we're going to become so much bigger, so much greater. So my reaction when you say invoke the fairies, I realise I know nothing about women, I know nothing about fairies, and I know nothing about the land. And I started with, I suppose, in the last 2 years with the book on the land, because that's the easiest one. But I am keen to learn how to invoke the fairies, and to learn how to open myself. But even this conversation is a step in that. I normally, you know, give a talk and I control the narrative. And so now I have a fairy in another chair who's trying to invoke me, you know. And I'm allowed, I'm thinking I'm already, normally I'd interrupt before the questioner gets a chance to get a question. Dominate, which is a classic male thing to do.
Well, you can interrupt away, actually, because I met a fella on the Quay this morning, and I told him what I was up to. And I said, geez, I don't know where to begin with this lad. And he said to me, I said to him, what do you want to talk about this morning? And I said, you know, I said to myself, I won't do that because you work so hard. I know you make light of it, but I don't want you to be working today. I don't want you to be working this morning. So I just thought maybe if the fairies just roll on through us, you know, we'll feel like we've been carried along maybe. But fall to rough to the she anyway, Agus Corhamwood. Thank you. But I do recognise you as a fairy.
And I see the fairy element in me, and I'd like to bring more of that away. I'd put more of the logical brain aside for now. And I see it coming through me, despite myself. All those people now who like would follow me on Instagram or follow me, and I'm thinking, why? Because they're seeing that fairy element, I think, or some element coming through me, and I'm still struggling to catch up with it. I still have another view of myself, the view, you know, the little boy, well, not little boy, but the sort of logical view.
Were you called a fairy as a boy, as a child?
No, but when I ran for the Green Party in Longford, Westmeath in 2016, there was the Fine Gael represented TG, so I was the Green Party in Longford, Westmeath constituency, and we did a talk in front of young people in Longford, in the youth centre in Longford, and you know, all of us there. Robert Troy was there, Fianna Fáil, and Fine Gael man was there, and I was there, and I said something idealistic. Oh, look at this in the fairy boy. But luckily, no, I was never either teased or called a fairy. I was away with the fairies, definitely. But luckily, I was in the sort of schools that allowed that.
Yeah. And actually, I met someone this morning who come from England, and she said, no, she didn't know you, because I thought, well, we won't cover ground that all of you already know. But I think she might be here, I can't spot her, but I did think, there she is. Hello, Deborah Finding, who won Poetry Prize yesterday with an extraordinary poem. So Deborah, this is for you. And you inspired me to go and buy a box of matches this morning after we spoke. So Manchán, I'm going to invite you to tell your life story using the duration of the burning match. Okay? No, I was going to be mean. I'll give you a small match. If you were a bit like drawn up, we'd kind of revert to the small matches. But he had the 2-size matches in the shop, so I said, sure, we'll give him the extra long safety match to tell his life story. So here you are, Manchán. And sure, you have a glass of water if you're in danger of burning your fingers. But and now Anne has very kindly given us your kind of CD. But this is your life story. So I'm inviting you to tell to Deborah.
The poor insurers of the Riders by the Sea on stage.
That's why we have it. I'm sure we didn't mention it because we weren't getting it.
No. We don't think it's a fire alarm.
Well, the smoke of the match won't set that.
Of course won't. So I was born in Donnybrook in Dublin, in a house that was both one side very connected to Longford and the other side very connected to the Republican tradition and West Kerry. And my granny lived underneath of us, and she was this Republican warrior, this freedom fighter who had fought for the language and fought for freedom for the island for so long. And then, but we had brought up in Donnybrook, but then spent a lot of our time in West Kerry too. So in this little house in Donnybrook, I only heard Irish until I was 4 or 5. And we had a garden at the back. And so although I didn't really like people too much, or friends, I had 2 cats that I liked, and I loved my herb garden. And so that was me until I was 17, you know. Obviously, it's, you know, when you're age 12 and 13, you have to have a few friends to go to things. But I was me and the fairies in the bottom of the garden. And then you have to join the real world when you're 18, and I didn't want to, so I travelled. I went to Africa, I went to South America, I went to India. And then I still wasn't ready to join the real world. I have 2 seconds left.
No, okay, and then what we do, we'll give you a shot match now.
I'm almost finished. So, at the age of the age of, that was from 19 to 27, I travelled the world. At 27, I started making documentary programs about minority cultures all around the world. And then only about 5 years ago did I start looking or less about the Irish language, and that's what I'm doing now, following that same thread.
I actually didn't want that first match. I was a bit nail-biting watching when it would end. I wanted it to continue, but it finished that following the thread of smoke and the thread of the Irish language. But I kind of feel like I'm going to wait to talk about that with you if you don't mind. Because another thing that I noticed this morning is that Manchán is wearing his sandals. And he told me before that his father was a sandal wearer. Your father, Michael. Just tell me a little bit about Michael and the sandals.
So, as you said, in my whole life history, I was focused on my mother's side of the family because they were the illustrious people. They were the O'Reilly, who was my great-granduncle on my mother's side, who was one of the founders of Conor McGrath, of the Gaelic League, and of who founded the Volunteers, the IRA. But then my other side, they were, so I said, from West Kerry, and they were big Celtic scholars. But my father's side was just these quiet farmers from Longford, Redmond-like farmers, Fine Gael farmers, who just dairy producers, you know, from at least before the famine, they bought this land. And my dad then was the next generation, was meant to inherit the farm in Kilishee on a bad cross and road on the way to Lanesborough, but he didn't want to. His head was full of imagination, was full of otherworldly dreams. There's like pictures of him in this farm. He was born in 1917, so in the 20s, dressed up as a girl and dressed up as Oscar Wilde and dressed up as all these characters. So he was obviously totally away with the fairies as well and laughed at ridiculously in Kilishee, and so got out and he moved to Dublin for a bit, Middlesex first, and then Dublin, was a doctor, was a radiologist, but had no interest in medicine either. He just was interested in local history and walking the mountains. And he always wore awning jackets that he got in O'Moyles in Shop Street in Galway. So that's the traditional jacket in all the Aran Islands. But then that's the only link that linked him and my mum's side of the family. The O'Reilly only wore Irish tweed, so my grandmother only ever dressed herself in Irish tweed up until her death in 1994. But my dad loved Irish tweed as well in terms of the bonnet. It was their connection. So he wore the bonnet and he wore the sandals. And leather sandals always. And yeah, he just didn't want to be part of the modern world. So my mum wanted him to work in Dubai and go to do consultancy doctor work somewhere where you learn one. But he just wanted to be a public health doctor, just doing x-rays and just being able to walk. And so I was so lucky. So he died when I was 20, but I was so lucky because I got his otherworldliness. He had no interest in the modern world, no interest in cutting-edge medicine, no interest was interested in history. And he loved reading poetry, Betchman and things. So that when I was a teenager, I'd be reading poetry with him, right? Totally, again. Obviously, if you're that kind of child, now it's nice to talk about that. That sounds like a romantic side, that I was growing my vegetables and I was sitting in my tree when other boys in the boys' school were playing competitive games and reading poetry with my dad. But actually, we realise that's the loner. We all know those children. We're worried about those boys who don't quite fit in. And we think nowadays they get more and more into anxiety. And I would have gotten, so I was you could say I was always lonely and realised, I don't fit in and I don't have friends and this and that. But for some reason, the thing that was different about me was I just had this connection with this just all-encompassing sense of love, this from an early child, if that's the fairies. And that's what I argue now, that the fairies, the word she, is, it's, used to be spelled S-I-D-H-E or S-I-D-E, S-I-D-E in Old Irish, S-I-D-H-E in Middle Irish, which is shida, to pronounce it. Shida, linguistically, has the exact same etymological root as siddha, which is a Sanskrit word. And siddha means a human being who has attained a certain degree of enlightenment, a human being who is connected with higher consciousness, and so is somewhat, enlightened. So the siddha is this, and it's found in Buddhism, and Hinduism, and Jainism, and it's connected to the shida, linguistically. So what are the fairies? Are the fairies these gods who are in the most beautiful areas all around us? And did our ancestors always have connection when they went into nature with the nourishing sense, the all-encompassing love that happens when you get in touch with whatever, the God source, or Dia, or Day? That D is the exact same D as inshallah. I had a fascinating conversation 3 days ago with a great Sudanese Irish Muslim young girl, 24, who blew my mind. So anyway, I think my dad was tapping into that, going on his mountain walks. He was 20 years older than my mum, so he was always, and he was 20, I was 20 at the time, he was 72, so he was a lot older. But luckily, to have this man who wasn't uber male, who wasn't very dominant, who was in a way, who loved walking in the history. And so I didn't consciously wear sandals and the bottom because of him, not consciously, but it does seem like a bit of a coincidence.
If Michael was alive, would he be 102 now?
Born in 1917, so he would have more, 105.
105. Yeah. Would you mind? I mean, we don't have to, but it is an invitation. Would you like to speak as Michael, just for a little while, about Manchán, the child? Because Wordsworth said the child is father to the man, and we're all very aware that, you seem to have the kind of gift of everlasting youth, like you've come from Tiernan Old. Like my wife Tama, who you know, she looked at the picture of you on the programme for the festival and she said, that photo's years old. That's him when he was way younger. I said, no, when I was out on a boat with him not so long ago, he looks even younger. He's going backwards. Living, kind of doing this strange thing in time. Going forward by going backwards in that kind of interesting, fairy way. But I thought, I don't know why, but your father, I thought it'd be nice to hear from him today.
I hope you heard the person over there who said very hard. You ask very hard questions, so
Well, you're free to ask him whatever you like.
It's a beautiful question. And had you asked about my granny, who obviously focuses really loads on my book, and I talk about, we know what she'd say. She wanted the Irish language and she wanted independence as an agenda, as a political tool. It was a small, it had idealism, but it was so small. But so we could easily say, well, my granny went, oh great, the Irish language is more to the fore and independence is more to the fore. But my dad is much harder, as you say, because you're having to strip away a man born in 1917 who had felt those feelings inside himself, clearly from the photos I see in the 1910s and 20s. He was so idealistic, but had to fill into a system and had to be a doctor. But so if I was speaking for my father about me,
and as him, so I'd say Michael, Hello, Michael. Michael.
Yeah.
I'll start with this book, Listen to the Land Speak. Okay, so Michael. And this is Manchán's most recent book. And from, getting to know Manchán, it seems to me he's following in your footsteps.
Yeah. And there's more sort of emotion than ideas coming up when you say that. There's a great man that I followed called the Pope O'Mahony. I knew this man, the Pope O'Mahony. There's a great man, in fact, in Kenny called Rupert Butler, who I knew, I'm speaking as my father. And Hubert Butler knew more about the essence, the veins of Ireland than anyone. And the other man was the Pope O'Mahony. The Pope O'Mahony was the last of the Shanachies. He'd go around Ireland and would just stay in people's different houses and different. I felt so lucky to have known him, the Pope O'Mahony. He was half a vagrant and half a seer. But he had knowledge and I was able to touch on him. And I see elements of that in Manchán. I see, Hubert Butler was a master stylist, a master prose, and a brain that was so sharp. So I wouldn't equate my son with those people. But Manchán is following that. Because Hubert Butler saw through an anthropological view of the social Ireland and how its connection with the world, just through sheer mind. And the Pope O'Mahony, just by being almost a vagrant, going every night, sleeping in a different house and asking for the stories of that time, he got the local story of the people. And he told them where he was in bars or at lectures or talks. The Pope O'Mahony, I don't think wrote books, but everyone knew him because he just talked, he told stories. And me, Michael, I got my stories. There's no village that I could go into around Ireland. I wouldn't know the local history. No village. But most of it was from going to a lot of talks and lectures, local history, but really just reading books. And Manchán is weaving all those. He's finding some of the folk stories of the people, and he's finding some of the actual history by doing the anthropological research. And so, had I had my life over, more than anything, I'd like what you doing what Manchán is doing. I'm proud of it.
And are you helping him?
Yeah, I'm helping him every way, yeah. So, as he said, it took a long time for me, it took a while for me to step out of all of the places that I got locked up in life. So I ended up a doctor, I ended up drinking a little bit, I ended up just stuck. And so when I passed over to that other level and remembered what I could see, it took time for me to free me and to see and to get to remember who I was. And now I'm there in such a way.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so grateful to Michael and to Manchán for really being a great friend to us all, really helping us see, and helping us walk the land and feel it through our leather sandals. So thank you. Very moved by you, Michael, and by you, Manchán. And wasn't intending this, but I'm aware that you've been doing. You sometimes do silent retreats, even though you are a wordsmith, Manchán. You'll often do silent retreats, and I thought, sure, we can be silent for a little bit now and see what happens if we like. Wasn't intending that now, but will we try that? And because I'm not very good with time, maybe we'll use a match again. So will I use a long match for the silence or the short one? Which would you like? Long one. Long one. There was a lovely little put at the end of that frame that I was trying to catch on the microphone. It's like a lifetime, isn't it, Manchán? And I'm very struck. The last time we met, you talked to me about the realisation very early in life about the illusion, the illusionary nature of things. And I don't really understand that. So, say if we just ground that right now, here we are, here in this room together. Where does the illusion lie in this scenario right now? That might be a faulty question, and if it is, you can correct the question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like when you hold up the match and you say, it's a life. And for some people, I think, might get a jolt at that and say, oh my God, isn't life so short? But immediately I've just shifted to the box of matches. There's loads more lives there, you know. And I'm not particularly wedded to this life. Like we see, it's a series. There's no logic decision to this, but for me, I clearly see that I'm in this life now, and that there's things I want to do at the moment. But if it ends tomorrow, I'll just start again in a new life. They don't need to be done, particularly in the early 21st century. So we are temporarily. It looks like we're temporary in this life. And so it's really good to try and focus in this life on a day-to-day, because there's so many sort of blissed out New Agers and hippies who just go into their head and don't. And it would have been so easy for me to do that when I was like living up in the Himalayas, like just forgetting about the world. But it's really good, particularly for my type of person, to root themselves into this world and into this reality. But it's just the way my brain works, it's really easy for me to focus back and to see the illusory and to see how everything is make-believe, and we're just by an act of focusing physics in terms of the density of molecules and atoms coming together and being hard and solid in incarnation in a body, and focusing our minds to think about Ireland, or to think about questions, or to think about this being Saturday morning. But it's so, and we think, okay, not a few of us can get into the wider view, but all of us, if we do a yoga class, or if we do a meditation, or if we spend particularly a day of Tai Chi with those things, it's so easy to jump back out. The brain really wants to even in a spa, in a health spa, it's so easy for us to go out into that wider world. Some of us, all of us, but a lot of us then get heavy down, get addicted to the density. So all of us, for me, I try. I'm caught up in the illusion as much as everyone else, but also I can drop it very easy.
So what you kind of almost said, that I'm caught up in the incarnation illusion. Is the incarnation the illusion?
Yeah, it is, exactly. It's a temporary illusion beyond where we're not connected to the oneness, to the everything. I believe there's no proof of that whatsoever. And you know what's lovely now, as you say, I think I told you that there was this sort of spiritual guide who I met when I was 20, I suppose. He was a civil servant who wrote books, who did very well in Easton's in the 1980s, called The Grand Design. And he used to sort of channel these beings. And he met me when I was 20, and he said, you know, you've had other lives, and I didn't even know much. I don't either believe or not believe in incarnations. It's just a way of thinking of how tiny that match is now, and how actually we're connected to things that are so much bigger. And he said to me, he said, you know, you had your last incarnation, he said, is going to very impact this incarnation. And he said, the best word for it was an anthropologist. And he said, that term wasn't there. So I'm just using that word. He said, it wasn't there when you were alive. But you just were in other cultures, and you were fascinated by the profundity. You were a white person from the West, from Europe. And you were fascinated by what you saw in other cultures, and how sophisticated they were. You wrote reams of these big journals when you were away in the tropics or somewhere. And then I died before I got there. My books never made it back. And he said, this life is about continuing that. He said when I was 20. Now, he could have maybe implanted a seed that then made me make all those travel documentaries, and made me, at the end of those travel documentaries, he did the worlds. I thought, oh, wait there, all of that knowledge, all of that 8 years of making documentaries in Africa, and South America, and India, was all about realising, oh, wait there, all of that profundity and wisdom is actually back at home. So we don't know, but so then it's kind of easy for me to look at incarnation, because I'm thinking, oh yeah, that was what I was doing. And let's say it's just someone last night in Carmel said something to me. They met an indigenous group there was an EU gathering in Geneva among indigenous people, and everyone said, okay, tell me who you are in your own language. Like, so, Husnig and Farsha, a Genevieve of Began or free thing, Achneer Evan Gaelga, so he said Dakar. So the teacher, he tried to say, this man from Carmel, he tried to say some things about himself, but he couldn't in Irish. And after the end, an indigenous woman came up to him and said, I am so sorry for your troubles. And he said, why? And she said, if you can't talk with your own tongue, if you're dumb, you cannot communicate if you can't communicate with your ancestral voice. And he said, what do you mean? And there was a group, there was about 16 of them in a room. So they said, we're going to show you what we mean by that. And you might have, I'd never heard this before. They put 8 people in front of them, all with their hands on each other's shoulders, and then 8 people behind them. And they said, okay, now walk around the room, lead the group around the room. So you have to lead the 8 people in front of you and the 8 people behind you. And obviously he wanted to go forward, but it was very hard to push them forward. And slowly he got into it. He was able to, by communicate, you know, movement, and then he could lead them slowly and lead the ones who were going before him and lead the ones who were going behind him. He said that's what ancestors mean, the indigenous people said. In the West, you think ancestors are your grandparents, your great-grandparents. It's so much bigger. You're leading all those who go before you, and you're leading all those behind you, and you are one. And maybe that's a more interesting way of talking about these things rather than incarnations.
Mm-hmm. But interesting that it was a movement, and it wasn't through language at all then it was expressed, even though she was mourning the teacher's lack of access to his mother tongue. She could express it without language at all.
You know, when we say ancestral language, it's not the sounds, but it's not the words, it's not the sentences or the paragraphs. It's the energy, the essence. It's like Ennis, the Olympic bakery, the famous thank you, Seamus, yeah. And it said, you know, that he didn't so much play notes in a room, but he played colours and infused with that. So it's easy to mix whether we're talking about movement or colour or sound or light. They're all energy vibrations.
Mm. So maybe more like the vehicles in which these things travel or can be communicated about are just roots. They're roots. But I suppose I'm just aware that your last book was 32 words for feel. Mm-hmm. No, that wasn't your last book. You Tree Dog, Banshees Fingers.
Yeah. Before you ask, I could agree. Just something interesting happened. So you asked me the question about Michael, and I talk about Michael. And from my point of view, my logical male point of view, I'm not saying anything very interesting. So like I'm a communicator, so I try and put content into my sentences. Now, Carmel asked me that question, so I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to do the logic controlling the narrative, Manchán, put nice facts in boxes and communicate them. Make it interesting, keep people relevant. I should do something else. But it seems that the room was probably more impacted by that bit of our talk than anything before. And that's not me. That's not my words. That was the energy. You unleashed an energy in me, and I don't know. But it seemed that had an impact on the audience. So, but it wasn't the words.
Yeah.
It's a good example.
Yeah, I did feel Michael. Here it is. Did you? Yeah. Thanks, Michael. He's not gone. Milkshake in. Actually, at this moment, I'd love to let someone in here who has a...
When you mentioned Seamus Ennis and then music through colour, I knew Seamus Ennis very well. I was in Marine, and he used to come there all the time. He was with the other dancers. But I never knew that before. But I've heard since that a lot of autistic children who are musical, they play music through colours. They see the notes as colours. I don't know if you've heard that.
No.
So it's interesting, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe autism is something to do with being aware of the world, being part of this other dimension, whatever.
Yeah, thanks. And did you all hear that maybe autism is being aware with the fairies? I love inviting in, you know, that each person on this earth, each being kind of is part of the greater intelligence. Each stone, you know, the way Cabinet talks about the footfall tapping secrecies of stone. Like that really seized me. I'd say it was the idea that most lived my imagination as a kid, because I understood that stone could speak, if you could tap it. Which I think you're doing very much in this book, but I saw there was just a question here.
I began studying Eastern philosophy over 45 years ago, and I came across Siddha.
Can you hear this, lady? Okay, so you started studying Eastern philosophy, and you came across, can you speak louder?
I think it was in Tibetan Buddhism, but it was Indian yoga and all of that. I was really interested. And I saw the word Siddha in my Tibetan Buddhism reading, and then I come to Irish, and I'm not a great Irish expert, but I saw Sida, and I said, and this was years ago, I said there must be some connection. And the basis of that thought has set me on writing a novel. But I thought, no, I'd be considered crazy. And then I read 32 Words for Feel, and I read your chapter, which was wonderful, on the relationship between languages and between Celtic and Sanskrit. And I love Sanskrit, and as a result of your book, I'm beginning to love Irish again, even though my knowledge was rudimentary. So I want to thank you for that. I think it's wonderful. And the other thing you said, during my journeying with Eastern religions, the whole idea of reincarnation became a kind of, I don't know, a fad, I thought. And so I found I had to ground myself more, a bit like you. And I found it through Taoism and through meeting Jeff Feng, who wrote about the Taoist I Ching. He wrote that, but he was a very grounded person, really grounded. And that brought me back more to following that path. And that has brought me back to nature more. And I would think even shamanism, the early days of mother, goddess, because I think that's what we've lost. I think we would have a very different kind of world if we had listened and followed the goddess. I think patriarchal religions came along and just got rid of all of that, unfortunately. So I just want to thank you for making us more aware of all of that. I really appreciate your writing very much. So thanks.
Thank you. What's your name?
Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
I thought of A. Russell when you're talking about fairies.
You know, A. Russell.
Yeah, because he seemed to bring both together. You know, he helped with the agricultural movement in Ireland. He was a very practical man, but he was also a poet and mystic. And I just admired him as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. There's something about being in the realm of contradiction that it's almost like it's not the either or, but the relationship, the journey between the contradictory poles that that's what I love about poetry, like the capacity to animate the space between what seems to be opposing ideas, and that it's the pinging between them seems to be the place, the rich live place, or the animated place. Do you want to comment on anything that has just been said? Or?
Yeah, so I've now written a book about the links between Ireland and India. I haven't published it yet, and ideally it'd be an illustrated book in the same format of the Three Dogs, Banshees Fingers. The publisher Quay weren't immediately excited, but I'll find a way to get them excited by it. But the links between Ireland and India are just so potent in terms of linguistics, in terms of social structure, in terms of stories, in terms of song. And all of them are laid out in a single book, 1972 or 73, The Celts in the Area by Miles Dillon, the great Celtic scholar. And no academics have questioned it. No, it hasn't been thrown out. They just ignored it. And things happen. Things get sidelined. And we're at this time, and what's going to happen now? I realised this week. The future of the internet is India. English-speaking internet is India. America's got smaller stuff. Facebook, Twitter, everyone that's on it is going to be India. Like what I'm saying about there'll be 100 Indians for everyone else of English-speaking internet. And they're going to have an English that's exactly like American English. Well, they'll hopefully keep some of their unique English, but it's going to be like all of those podcasts. And they're going to reach out and realise the things that Miles Dillon realised in 72. So many of their aspects of their culture are identical in Ireland. It's going to be this flowering. So it is time that we start unearthing these now and seeing. And the reason why it happened, obviously, we were all farmers. We're Bronze Age farmers. Even our DNA has a lot of this early Bronze Age farming in it. We learned how to farm the Pontic Steep in the east of Russia, the east of Europe, the west of Asia, and then we moved down to the Mediterranean, we honed it, and then some of us went west to Ireland, others went east to India, or others, maybe they stayed where they were. But anyway, it's the same culture. But so many things happened in the middle of the pond, and only on the perimeters. In India and Ireland do they stay the same. So we have all of these connections. But because we're all the same people even before that, we can go forward. So there's a wonderful woman, Jerusha, who set up the Irish School of Irish Studies in Beijing, and she's studying the links between Tao and Irish. Now they're more tenuous, but you can still find very profound ones. Unfortunately, that sort of stuck, because it's not really safe to go to Beijing. You don't want to be doing any research in China that might annoy Chinese people. But that's something that's going to come. So, and the key element of what has happened in AE and what's happened in the late 19th century with the likes of the O'Reilly and Yeats and all, what they did was amazing, but they had a late 19th century view of the world, and particularly a patriarchal view of the world. And what's happening now, only in the last 10 years, is we are beginning to relook at our own myths, our own language, our own culture, beginning to do so from a female gaze. And that's going to open up, not just female, just a balanced gaze, not an overtly male gaze is really what we want. And probably first an overtly female, and then a balanced, more. But that's going to change it. We are going to look at our history, we're going to see our mythology, we're going to see our language in entirely different ways. We're going to see our relationship with the landscape, with the goddess of the land, in entirely different ways. It's like a really exciting time. You could say in one way, it's a worrying time to be alive, but what's opening, and this isn't just happening in Ireland, but what Ireland, because we've kept so much of our own lore, our own language, and the ritual and sacred sites of our landscape alive, we have an almost an obligation, first to unlock, to open up this connection we've been lucky to keep to some extent, and then to spread it out elsewhere. I think there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, in this book, Listen to the Land Speak, I think some of us would be very familiar with Bridget, or the Bridget, if it was an office, not just a one person, but the goddess Bridget, Saint Bridget, all her different faces, manifestations. But Anya, I really didn't know, and Anya really lives in this book. Because this book isn't out yet, Listen to the Land Speak, would you mind telling us a bit about Anya?
Yeah, I will. And just to, because your last question was about the duality, about the two sides, and like Bridget is a great example of that. Like Bridget being the Cailleach. We all have a sense of the Cailleach, the old hag, the bringer on of winter, the destroyer, the Durga figure in Irish consciousness. And she had her great club, her falfu, her club that she would beat back the winter bushes in November with and bring on winter, bring on demise, the destruction, where the sun disappeared entirely or almost entirely. And so she was destruction. She was evil. She was old. She was shriveled. And then on the 1st of February, she becomes Bridget. So the reason that myths are difficult for us to understand now is because we're so locked in this linear, rational mindset. Until Einstein tried to tell us time is not linear. Nothing is rational. It's all relative. It's all circular. It's all. And so the mythological view of the world was also circular. So of course, Bridget and Cailleach can be the same because they're just a paradigm of female energy, of the growth in life. And growth always has the up and the down, the flowering and the flourishing and the dying. So they're one and the same. The other key thing about Bridget, which is and Clonakillen, is like Bridget, where is she? She's based in Kildare, the oak, the sacred tree of our ancestors, of all Celtic and Gaelic people. The oak was the power tree, where we worshipped under the Nemeton, under the sacred oak boughs of the sacred sanctuary in the woodland. Normally, it's presumably was oak. So Kildare, Bridget comes out of the oak wood. She's coming out of that tradition of us worshipping the trees, in the same way as Clonakillen from Dilla, it's from oak again, Dilla, the oak. All of the ancient knowledge that's going to root us to our landscape is still being kept alive by Christianity in this beautiful way. They've once just put a veneer on it so that they knew this is going to be a temporary time, that Christianity is in vogue, almost like concrete housing, almost like the beautiful patching here in Kilmore, Quay. They used for a while more modern techniques, but knew you could strip that off and the truth was going to be there. So that was with Bridget. Anya is another thing. And Anya, I knew nothing about Anya. First, I am a journalist, so I know very little about everything. I know no more than like if you have an academic on stage, they're going to share the first 1% of all their knowledge. I only have the 1%. You know, I'm a journalist. I know how to get that 1% and connect it together. So this book about the land was meant to be about, okay, let's talk about the heroic, mythic characters. Let's talk about Cuchulainn and Finn McCool. Of course that's what we do, because we are in still a male-dominated society. So the people we're going to talk about are men, because that's who we've always been told to talk about. And that's what I was going to do, because I am a product of that. And then I started writing the book, and saying, oh, here's the story about Finn McCool, here's the story about Cuchulainn. And in every place, it just became evident. I don't do much research. I don't go down into like dusty tomes. I do digital research, but no going into archives. Just every place that these characters are, there's either an Anya, or an Etna, or a Fola, or an Eru, or a Boyd. There's goddesses everywhere. They've been left there. They haven't been hidden. They've just been slightly ignored, wallpapered over. So the minute you start looking for them, they're there. And particularly Anya is interesting, because Anya is the goddess of, it's hard to, the goddess of, this is a Greek and a Roman idea to have a god of or a goddess of. Irish don't, everything's encompassing, everything is plus and, everything is black and white. So Anya is a goddess who can be equated to brightness, illumination. The word Anya, An is Old Irish for bright or shining. So Anya is the genitive of, the of brightness or of shining. And it's the idea of the warmth, the sun, the light coming from the south. You know, we as settlers arrived here 10,000 years ago when the warmth came from the south and melted the ice sheet. So our people were following the warmth, the sun. Every year when we're growing, we're luring the sun back to warm the soil. So Anya was a manifestation of all this. And so the Tuatha Danann, it's most often thought that Tuatha Danann translates, Tuatha Danann were the people, the beings, the otherworldly beings, half human, half deities, who lived on this island before us, and they now live under the ground. They're the ship of the sheep. And they're Tuatha Danann. Tuatha, the people of Danann, the Anya, of Anya. They're the people of Anya, of this great goddess. And so, what interested me in so many, the key thing is she's actually represented in the land, in Munster. The province of Munster is basically the body of the goddess. So, in Loch Gur, which is a very little known sort of pretty lake outside between Bruff and Hospital in Limerick, south of Limerick, and that's a Limerick city. And in it there's a lake, and in the centre of the lake there's a little hill that rises up, Loch Gur. Now the lake doesn't go the whole way around anymore because draining happened in the 18th, 19th century. But originally it was, and you had this pregnant belly of a hill rising up. What do we know about Loch Gur? First the name, Loch Lake, Gur, Cark Gur. You know, a hen sitting on her eggs. Gur means incubation, sitting on eggs, warming the eggs. So basically, Loch Gur, it's the lake of incubation, the lake of the pregnant Anya. Underneath every story about it, there's hundreds of thousands of stories about Anya connected to Loch Gur. She's living under it, she's living above it. So there is her pregnant belly. And then just about 6 kilometres up the road is Kilmore, which is where the central place of the spirit, of the head, of the mind of Anya. And then down the road, a bit far down the road now, on the Kerry-Cork border, Shea of Loitra, are the Paps of Danu, Paps of Anya, the breasts of Anya. So, you could imagine being in South America or in Africa or being an Aboriginal culture in Australia and then taking you out to the land and saying, this is the goddess, this is her body, this is the goddess has been here for 10,000, 25,000 years in anthropological, in Australia. We have the same here. The whole of Munster is basically a goddess. And then if we start thinking about that, we rethink the idea of how we've now allowed in the last 15 years the increase of dairy farming to pollute all of those rivers of Munster. We begin to re-see how we exploited the land. And again, this is only a revelation that happened in the last year. My book, 32 Words for a Field, has beautiful, insightful words about the landscape. And so only during Zooms with different Indigenous people during the year, where I start talking and I say my nice words that show the 32 Words for Field or something else about land, or my new coastal project where I talk about fishermen sea words. They're all exploitative words for how mankind can use the landscape better for their own means. And when Indigenous peoples come on the same Zoom talk straight after me, their words are about the essence of the soil, the land itself, nothing to do with humans. So it's very different. But if we start seeing land as a goddess, then we maybe might shift away from this purely male-driven, exploitative, avaricious sense of connecting with the landscape. That's my answer to all.
going visiting that pregnant belly near where I'm from, and I've never heard of her growing up. So thank you for that. So the female in your life and the female in you, how's that coming along and how's that growing in you of late?
Yeah. So, as you say, both me and my dad weren't overly male anyway, macho, so I don't have to, give up my rugby subscription or whatever, or stop doing weights or whatever. But I'm realising, so I would have been pretty balanced. And if when I was young in the herb garden, being interested, having this connection with this angelic energy. And angels are never male or female. I don't even like to use the word angel, it's putting a word, whatever it was, this energy that I was able to tap into, it wasn't either male or female, it seemed both and or everything, or beyond that simple duality. And what's interesting in this world is now people are talking the they concept, the one beyond duality. I'm not directly focused into that, but what I am focused on is Sue, my current partner, my girlfriend, who's like in her 30s, and her friends, are an entire different form of human. Like these women in their 30s now are becoming so strong, so eloquent, so clear about the message they want to communicate. So me, who's 52, born in 1970, realised that I'm having to catch up. That's why I'm so aware of the slight male prejudices, the prejudices of anyone born in the 1970s. But not only are the anti-female prejudices, I would argue, are not just in men who were born in the 70s and any time before, but they're in women too. We're encoded, we're conditioned into this idea. So it's really interesting to be around people in their 30s who are, but then if I was around, and I am through my brothers and sisters' children, those young people in their teens and 20s, they have such a strong new view of a whole more rounded, more powerful view of the female, of the woman. So how is it sitting in me? I am realising how I need to grow. I'm realising I'm lucky I'm at a certain step on the way. But
when you say your girlfriend Ashton and the women of her generation in their 30s, I'm the same age as you, born in 1970, they're so clear about their message. What's the message?
Well, first, it's not for me to speak for them, but having last night been to see the wild geese, there's a lot of strong women coming out with really strong messages, and being in a room at the Carmel Apple Festival in Carmel, in Tipperary, where basically there was a room full of men and women singing different names for vagina. All to a great chorus, like for 4 minutes. And the women were loving it, and the men were trying to hold their pints and going, I could list, about 14 different words for the vagina, but I won't, because we've now come to Wexford. It was okay to
but let's share a few. So we know what to call ourselves.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, because I was only, because they wanted a word from every place. So we went to Clonmel, the word was, begins with V. No, it doesn't. No. So it doesn't begin with V. I couldn't think of an F. What the hell was it? It wasn't. I'll probably do
elsewhere first and come back. What words did you grow up with for vagina? Did you have any words?
I did. It was probably just vagina and cunt, to be fair.
Oh, and Australia?
Oh, good. In Irish, no, not until I was older did we have a word. My Irish was the Irish of a family, of a household, and we didn't probably use the word penis or vagina in the Ireland.
Because in 32 words, you've loads of words for penis.
I do.
At various stages of health and lifespan and whatnot. But, so what was the first word in Irish you came upon, or the early words you came upon for vagina?
The first, I liked the idea of riasgrunda when I came across it, which is like a secret marsh but I don't know, then there was nasty male words. There was grata, which is like a grate, which is rather nasty. But peach, I love the word. The first time I came across even penis was when I was in the Irish word with bud. It was in Nolan Nihono wrote a poem that I did at first year college. Peach and bud are lovely, simple words. Pish, actually. Not peach is peas, pish is. Pish is actually a clitoris, but can be vagina. It's used for both.
Right.
Yeah. But like, the key thing, as you said, I have all those lovely male words of sexuality, and 32 words, and the female words just aren't, they're out there, they exist, but they haven't been recorded because the male folklore collectors weren't collecting them, the priests certainly weren't collecting them. And so one of my like real activities I just do whenever I'm in a grounds, you know, the young women who are now teaching yoga or doing exercise, I'm asking them to go to the older people and find the words. Because Nuala Niamh says it, she thought there was no words for sexuality in the Irish language, and she was brought up in the West Kerry grounds. You know, sometimes spent in England, in Lancashire, and some spent there. And until she was married, and she was brought into the back kitchen, and all the women then told her that other entire diction of vocabulary. So it's there, but you need people to...
Manchán, there's a salutation in Ring, and I've always known it, and I know the men used to always say it. And it was Slánta agus Coward, agus Gamaratu, and Cruiger Gagal, her father and Megan Gaul.
Oh, wow, beautiful. Exactly. Yeah. And to be fair, Blind Boy has really helped that bring the word gowl back and give the full etymology. So we'll go through the sentence again. So Slánta agus Coward, you know, help and help. Cower, la help.
Yeah. Agus Gamaratu, and Cruiger Gagal, her father and Megan Gaul.
Oh, how are we going to remember that?
Will you give the microphone to this woman? What's her name? Breed.
It's Slánta.
Wait now till he switches it on. Thank you, Breed. Bridget. The Bridget is speaking.
Okay, it's Slánta agus Coward. Agus Gamaratu, and Cruig the Gaul, her father and Megan Gaul. The Megan on a goat. That's the hair on your fanny, as we would say. As long as the Megan on a goat. That you may live, you know, until that hair is that long. Slánta agus Gamaratu.
Okay, so will we all, you repeat each piece slowly enough that those of us in the room who don't speak Irish can repeat it after you.
You know, we need to somehow send that out to the world. Like, it's such a valuable thing. So if the whole room know how to say it, then we need to video everyone saying it.
I think this is being recorded.
Oh, poor old right by the sea, poor old right by the sea.
Well, aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky, Breed? Breed, so will you teach us it and we'll all repeat it after you, section by section first, and we'll try it all together then.
Okay, Slánta agus Coward.
Slánta agus Coward.
Now I just say it's Gamaratu.
Agus
Gamaratu.
Agus Gamaratu.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Her father le Megan Gaul.
Her father le Megan Gaul. I'm loving this. I'm loving this, Breed. But we're not done yet. We'll put it together. Could you do it again just the way you did it, but also after we said it in Irish, remind us what it meant in English as well. Okay.
Slánta agus Coward.
Slánta agus Coward,
which means health and strength. Is Gamaratu. Sorry. Agus Gamaratu.
Agus Gamaratu.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Her father. Le Megan Gaul. As long that you may live, Slánta agus Coward, health and strength, and may you live till the hair on your fanny is as long as the Megan on a goat.
So is it overdone if we did one more video just to that?
We do want to do, I'd love, so Manchán, if you and Breed say it once more all together as one, and then after that we'll make a Hales bit, no doubt, but we will try and do it all together.
Step by step is good, but up to you.
Oh, step by step, we'll go with that then. Okay, we'll go once more. I was loving what I was hearing though.
Yeah, and then I promise them we're going to, it's just too valuable. Like, no one has heard that outside the ring. That's
Did you ever heard
No, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Where we go?
Am I starting?
Are I glass?
Slánta agus Coward.
Slánta agus Coward.
Agus Gamaratu.
Agus Gamaratu.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Gme Cruig the Gaul.
Her father le Megan Gaul.
Her father le Megan Gaul.
Up she's little bit, not flattened her.
Well, we're well away with the fairies now. Thank you, Breed. Thank you, Bridget and Breed. Thank you. That's great, isn't it? Any question bubbling up there, meant to be heard there from Anne? Oh, sorry, there's, what? Was that a time? Oh, we've only 5 minutes left. Oh, I thought we were going to 1/4 past. So, if we have 5 minutes left, there's a few different questions. Will we start there, so? Thanks.
It's on.
Hello. Hi, Manchán. I find your optimism truly uplifting, but given the sort of calamitous state of our planet, I'm wondering, is your optimism slightly misplaced? I mean, I find it wonderful and fair play to you, but that would be my concern.
Yeah, so I need to be true to my truth. So I should say how I feel. And other people, logical, balanced people, should listen to other voices too. But all I can do is be true to my... All I feel really strongly is humanity has only begun since 2010, since 2012. We never had, the masses never had the ability to actually care for the planet in a non-exploitative way. It's only begun. So everything starts now. Everything's been the dark ages until now. And you can say, yes, we've started in a rather perilous place, but give us a chance. Consciousness is only waking up. So we could easily decide to say it's all in despair. And there's definitely, I think there's that lovely quote, that idealism is only for people who don't know the facts. But I'm not faking, and I believe it so strongly, and I have to be true to myself. But it's really important that a lot of people dismiss me if they think, actually, I'm not clued into the right things.
But why 2010, 2012?
Just roughly the beginning of the 21st century. After that, I just think there was a dark energy from... And we know also, when we were born in the 1970s, France still had slaves in Africa in the 1970s, actually up until the early 80s. They had factories in France where there was still slavery. Like, the majority, when we were, our grannies, our parents were all born into a time in Ireland where people had no chances whatsoever. They had to emigrate. There was a feudal system or an oppressive system throughout the whole world. That all broke down in the 20th century, a time of great mess. But it was the first chance that humans had, masses of humans, rather than very elite, to decide their own destiny. And you could say they're making the wrong decisions by buying Coca-Cola. That's okay. In terms of the history of humanity, of thousands of years of oppression by a few leaders, it's only begun, I'd say, in the last 10 or 20 years. So I would say...
Are you pagan, Manchán, or have you got... Yeah.
No, I suppose, as I said, I was born with that sense of this energy, of this loving energy, so I don't know how to describe that. But I do, just because, 3 days ago I did an interview with a great woman, a Sudanese-Irish woman called, I won't talk, but anyway, she's Sudanese-Irish Muslim, and she says, inshallah the whole time. So when she's speaking Irish, she says, Lekuna Day. And we think, with our small-minded things, we can't say Diabach and Bailo Yirgit because we're post-Catholic and we're getting over the sins of the Catholic Church, and so it's polluted. No, that day and Dia is so much more. It's the beauty of the God that was in Catholicism, and the beauty of the God that was in Christianity, and the beauty of the God that was in Muslim, as well as the tragedy that was in these human man-made religions too. But I think it's time actually we welcome back the whole Dia into the Irish language again, which probably 3 weeks ago I wasn't. I'm still getting you ideas on these the whole time. But whether it's a pagan god or...
Well, when I arrived into Kilmore, Quay yesterday evening, I met a man who taught me, the bliss of finding the, I suppose, Cola Brack's fairy entrance. But I think from that gateway, he was describing it into what he calls Jesus, and who he calls Jesus. And I said to him, what does it feel like to be in the presence of Jesus? What is that like? And he said, everything, and he was doing this with his hands, everything changes. Everything shifts. It's just this deep peace then fills your heart. And he kept doing this with his hands, like making up the grotto kind of shape, but undulating, moving, And while I was listening to it was like what he was describing as being in the presence of Jesus I was like, that was what it was like to be in his presence as he told me his life story. But, so I was kind of thinking of him, I thought of him as a fairy, and it felt like he was reminding me I'm going to be with a fairy tomorrow. But like that, when you say about bringing Dia back in, it's like, it's lovely he could talk about that experience with the word Jesus, whatever gateway, you know. But that waking up business, you seem to be at the centre of it, certainly here. Like, how did that happen? Did you find yourself at the centre of a cultural shift, transformation? Or do you even know?
No, and if I am, it's only a temporary thing, and you know, someone else will replace me. I don't feel I'm in the right place.
But you do seem to be at the centre
It
of
does,
it.
in some ways. I'm part of the people. How are we with time? Are we going to get time? I did remember the word I got from vagina from Carmel yesterday. It's easy to take away. I've heard it before, but not for so long. Fange. Fange. Yeah.
Have anyone heard of that?
No.
Yeah, you did French. See, you're in your 30s, maybe. Or 20s? Oh, you're young looking, but come on. Okay, Fange. Have we, I mean, we've another, we can finish with another question or two?
Yes,
a burning question up here.
Hello. When you lit the match that time and we had our silence, I found that very moving. And what it actually reminded me of, and you kind of half said it there, Manchán, when I was a young person, we went to Mass, as we all did, but the one I liked was going to the first Friday on a Friday evening. And there were very few people in the church, and what I liked was the silences and maybe somebody, a footstep or a knock. And the same with the flame, looking at the candle. There's something powerful about looking at the light and the silences. So that brings up something spiritual, whether you call it religious or something beyond that. I don't know. And thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's another question here. Thank you. It's there.
It's just it's a simple question. I think. Okay. You began the interview, if my memory is correct, fairly early on by saying you could see the fairy in you. And you, I think, replied that you were becoming aware of it, or you could see it too. And I think I'd just love to ask, just very simply, how do you define that?
It's just sort of ties in with Carmel's final question there about me realising, so I'm just humbly doing my own things, grafting a lot, you know, doing a bit of Irish Times journalism, doing a bit of teaching car, and then in the last 2 years, I have a lot of people coming up to me saying, you know, that, oh, my books mean to them, or my podcast or something I say, and I'm still the same person who's just grafting, it's just trying to communicate ideas. So I'm thinking that might be the fairy, that was what I was reckoning. Something seems to be coming through me that I'm not aware of. And I talk to my partner about it a lot. I say, like, I go places now, and particularly like people in their early 20s, I'll be at a music club or something, they'll come up to me, people 22, Manchán Magan, and I'm thinking, I don't know what they're seeing in me, so that's why I think might be the fairy. There's something that I'm allowing through that I cannot see.
Could be just celebrity. You're obsessed with celebrity.
Yeah, well,
Can I ask you then what it was that you were seeing?
I see the shape-shifting energy of the fairy, that it won't stay embodied in any one thing that can be grasped, because the grasping is antithetical to its nature. So, Manchán, anytime you get commodified or constellated, you'll go, you will kind of almost go into sacrifice mode, because now, if something becomes commodified in its sanctity, you'll nearly sacrifice it, killing the head. But I suppose it's a mixture of words like leprechaun, fairy, priest, trickster, clown, fool. Could you add some words in Irish?
no, but I can't think it's like charlatan, fraud as well. Right?
Because when I met Manchán first, he hadn't written 32 Words for Few yet, and he had written these travel books, and I read them. And I met you at the Abbey first at a play I did called Be for Baby. Manchán was so kind. He was so warm and kind. And I read his books. He's a fearsome unveiler of people, which is actually one of the most dangerous things you can do, is watch someone and then make public your findings. So I was like going, oh my God, he's dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, it has kind of stayed with me. But I remember also in my naivety as a young woman, I did the same thing. It came from a very genuine, naive place. I wrote about people in a way that made them livid with me afterwards. You know, they'd beheaded me. Do you know what I mean? But, yeah, all those meanings, but I don't really... I think the fraudster, I don't think of that when I'm in your company. I think it's something much more in the realm of let's stay in movement. Where there's life, there's movement. And let's keep moving. So I want to thank you so much, Manchán. You are a wonderful consort and guide. Thank you so much. Yeah.